Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 140.
I'm Cam and this is Julie.
Yes, this is the Torah portion. I'm so used to saying like, this is the Brit Hadashah, or
Right.
this is the Haftorah, but this is the Torah portion. If you'd like to listen to our teachings from last year and the year before, last year was 94 A and B, and the year before that was 44 A and B, and I'm sure there's one a year before that, but I don't remember what it is.
No, not yet. I don't.
Oh, not yet?
No,
Okay.
Not till we get to Pincus. Then we start rolling into four.
with the four.
Yeah, that's right.
Gotcha.
All right. So we will be looking at Leviticus 21, 22, 23, and 24. So, we talked about this last week, and we said how we see how the Lord, like in the beginning of Leviticus, he sets up and he's like, okay, nation, here's how you're going to do it. And then he says, okay, priest, here's how you're going to do it. Now we are here for repeating what we had last week, but this week it's going to be for Aaron and the sons of Aaron, for the priest.
Gotcha.
So where, like example, be holy for I am holy, and we saw about no tattooing, no cutting for the dead, don't have your daughters whore, right? So we have all these things that we saw in chapter 19 that now we're seeing in 21, but it's for the priest. So they also are not to do these things, but they have a little more of a fence, per
Holiness.
se. Yeah, holiness. Because remember, they're drawing closer. So they're required more limitations, I guess you'd look at it, as far as interaction with the world. Because again, their job is mainly to interact with the Lord on behalf of us.
So when the Israelites say, what do you think, you're holier than us? They can say yes.
Absolutely. Yes, we are more set apart. That would be correct. It's funny how in our day and age, we want to see that as an insult. Like,
Right.
How dare you think you're
You think
better?
you're holier than everybody?
And better isn't the term, but called to be set
More set
apart
apart.
more
Mm-hmm.
because of the role they're in. And look, today we actually have people who, maybe for a person over here, the Lord says, don't do these things. It doesn't mean you can't, but for them in the position in which the Lord's
Right.
setting them up to function in, they cannot do these things.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the big overarching messages we see this week really looks at do not profane, right? How to be set apart, and no blasphemy.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the blasphemy. That's
So-
what I noticed a lot this week.
Yes. And one of the things with the profaning, remember, profaning basically just means
Making it common.
making it common, but misrepresenting. That's what I wanted to say. And in our misrepresentation, we're making them look like the rest of the nations, and that's
All
where
the
we
other
have
gods.
right. We're making them look like all the other gods. Now, I want to say something about that real quick. The truth is, all other gods have taken their lead from the living God.
Of course, yes.
So when we look back at ancient times, in Esther, I know we've talked before, Julie and I have really been looking, she's been doing Esther, I've been doing Ezra and Nehemiah, and looking at the kingly roles, Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, Esther's husband, whose name I can't say.
Artaxerxes.
Yeah. They're all called King of Kings. They all have that title because the king of the empire or kingdom, the top one, is called the King of Kings. When they have these huge kingdoms, vast kingdoms that go throughout the land, so they have these representatives who are acting as kings in each quadrant or area, town, village, whatever you want to call it, or bigger than that, city, and then he's king of these kings.
Right.
So each king of kings, okay, they have, this is interesting, they have a protocol in which you can approach them. It must be hell. If you do not follow this protocol, death to you.
Right.
That's the whole thing with Esther, right?
Yeah.
She was going to break protocol, but what did he do? He put out his scepter and accepted her in. Had he not done that, she would have died.
Should have died.
He chose who he would have mercy towards, just like the living God does, right? I'll have
Right.
mercy who I have mercy towards. Then they also set decrees. So they put out a law, and that law cannot be changed. So
Right.
anyway, these are things that the King of Kings and our King of Kings will do. Not as our King of Kings is copying theirs. It's that theirs is copying because they understood what the living God did and didn't do. And then one other thing was the ring, the authority of the ring. So I'm like, oh my gosh, so here we have Messiah who's literally given the ring because everything he does is in the name of the Father.
Right.
Right? So there's that seal that he has in which he is allowed through the Holy Spirit to put on us.
Right.
So we are sealed. We are a part of his his work, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, and a part of that makes the body. And so I wanted to, let's take the body idea and look again at this week's Torah portion. Messiah is the head of this body, right?
Right.
And this is the priest. This is the high priest, how they're going to act. The high priest has a little bit more set apartness, and then the priest must function under that body. Just like we're called to be kings and priests, we're going to function under the headship of Messiah. You know, we see at the beginning of 21, I mean, there are very few people that Aaron, the high priest, can
For the
defile
dead.
himself
Yes.
for the dead.
Yes,
But
right.
then there's this other thought, and this is midrash, or I guess this is the rabbinical thought, that when a priest passes a body who is dead, and no one is tending to it, they are allowed to defile themselves for that. Otherwise, it's profaning the Lord's name because they are allowing what was life made in God's image to be ignored.
Gotcha.
So then made me think of Messiah again. I'm like, so he saw us as the dead, so he allowed himself to be defiled so that we could be brought back to life, which is what happens. The one who's cleansing for the leper, the red heifer, all these things. Think about the one, even for Yom Kippur, the one who's doing the process of helping those become clean, take on the uncleanness themselves.
Right.
Yeah. So, while we see that you can't defile yourself, we also see where the Lord allows that ability for, it doesn't change it, but he allows life to trump everything. We talked
loophole.
about that. Yeah, the loophole is life trumps. In Leviticus 24:22, we see where he says there's one law for the stranger and for the native born. And I love this. There are other places we'll see it throughout Torah.
Right.
But it's always pointing to, if you choose to be linked with him, he will gladly accept you.
That's right.
He will gladly bring you in. So I was reading Ephesians 5.
Okay.
I did not realize how much Ephesians 5 goes with this week's Torah portion. So much that I would almost say, I wonder if that was the portion in which they were reading
That week.
when he wrote that
When
letter.
he wrote that.
Because it's all about how we are to walk in holiness, how we're to keep ourselves clean so that we can draw near. And then if you think about it, a little bit later in chapter 5, Ephesians 5, it talks about how the bride,
Yeah.
no spots, no blemish.
Right.
Isn't
Yeah.
that what we had here? Now, a cool thing about this week's Torah portion where it talks about if you have a blemish, if a priest has a blemish, that he's not to draw near, but he's not to draw near with the fire offerings or with the bread. When we look in 21:21, it says, "No man among the offspring of Aaron the priest who has a defect is to come near to bring a fire offering made by fire to the Lord. He has a defect. He does not come near to bring the bread of his Elohim. He does eat the bread of his Elohim, both the most holy and the holy. Okay. Only he does not go near the veil or approach the altar because of his defect, lest he profane my holy places, for I am the Lord who sets them apart." So he set them apart, yet he's saying, but you are set apart, but because of this in your life,
Right.
you can't draw this close, but you still get to partake. The great thing about this is when we see that the priests don't lose their position, and we also see this too, where when they're unclean in 22, they're unclean. They can't eat of they can't partake of the things that are holy until evening.
Right.
Right, but then they really can eat it that evening. They don't have to wait till the next day. I mean, that is the next day. But it just shows that when we're given from the Lord, what we're given, we can't, we don't lose it. We don't forfeit our title of being kings and priests in his holy nation, all right, or in his body. But we can forfeit the amount of participation
Yes.
that we get to partake of. Again, that's why we see in eternity, you've got the outer part, and then moving into then the cities, and then into the New Jerusalem, right?
Right.
So you have those parts. You're still in eternity, but what that looks like
Right.
Well, that's how we see this. They're all still priests. They don't lose that title. It's just how they're going to get to function. And one of their big things on how they're going to function is to not profane. Each time it says don't profane, it then shows how that profanity would look, what it would look like if you did this, then you would profane, you know.
Gotcha.
And in 22 verse 3, there's this interesting, it says, say to them, any man of all your offspring throughout your generations who draws near to the holy offerings which the children of Israel have set apart to the Lord. So this is what Israel brings, okay? While he is unclean unto him, that being shall be cut off from before me. I am the Lord. So basically, it's suggesting that person who disregards what their job is supposed to be. They disregard. They just are in it. Yep, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to get a part of that offering and eat it. You know, following the protocol. They don't really care. I'm unclean, but look, I'm a priest anyway. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my job. That it will be cut off. Which I thought was interesting, and then immediately made my brain go to Matthew 7, where the Lord says, you know, I'll cut you off. I didn't know you. Right, I'll cut you off because I didn't know you, even though you said you were doing things in my name. That's what these priests are doing. They're doing exactly what the Lord asked, but not with the right heart, because the uncleanliness they're bringing in.
Right. They're disregarding the protocol.
Yeah, great way to put it. Right.
You know, they're going through the motions, but they're disregarding.
Right. And that seems to be what's happening in Matthew 7. They're going through and doing what they think it should look like.
Right.
But boy, aren't we there? We don't go back and see how he asked it to be.
Right.
And so we're just going through the motions of what we think he wants instead of going back
Right.
to look at the detail of what he really has asked for.
Right, right.
Oh, another verse I wanted to throw out there too was 1 Timothy 5:22, and that's talking about us keeping ourselves clean and not participating in the sin. And we really see that being discussed this week, where it's in 24:14. It says, "Bring the one who cursed outside the camp, and all those who heard him shall lay their hands on his head, and the congregation shall stone him." Making sure that those who heard the cursing, the blaspheming of the Lord, okay? And you know, that word blaspheming can also mean to pierce, to strike through, to remove. Removing his kingship, removing his authority over our lives. Think about that, back with the don't cut yourself, tattooing, all those things that want to show, you know, that we have possession of this. Right? So he's blaspheming. What that looks like, I don't know. I mean, I love the fact that the Lord doesn't say, this is how you blaspheme, because I think more people would do it just to be like, oh, I know what I'm doing.
It'd be a formula.
Right, and those formulas are what I think get us in trouble on both sides.
Yes.
Because how many times do you see that with the word, oh, well, here's the formula. Well, okay, how about the prayer of salvation? There's the formula.
Right.
So they think it's done. You know, they forget the whole heart idea. So like I said earlier, the big thing is profaning, hallowed be thy name. It talks about keeping the name holy. And then also not blaspheming. A lot of this is upholding who he is. And that really is our jobs. We are to be imitators of Messiah, imitators of Christ, who is the one who is exact replica and perfect imitator of the Father.
Right.
And that's our job. And what these verses do is show us how we too are to do these things, how we are to be set apart, and how we cannot define what that looks like. We've got to let him define how being set apart is to be done. And we do what we can do in this day and age.
Yes.
Just think that sometimes these rules that seem so small and can be so easily overlooked have so much meaning and really will take us throughout all of Scripture if we will allow it to shape our lives and help to, improve our eyesight in the Word.
Yeah. And one of the things that Rabbi Foreman, when I was listening to him, was talking about how in the festivals, there seems to be sevens and ones.
Yes.
Sevens and ones. And I thought about my daughter, who is going into computer programming. She's about to graduate from college, and she's going into the computer programming. And I know just from listening to her, everything is ones and zeros. And I thought about that. I thought, okay, so in the digital world, it's ones and zeros. In the spiritual world, it seems to be sevens and ones.
Yeah.
One being the connector between the two. I don't know.
Between the sevens.
Between-
Well, again, if we live in a digital simulation,
That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
There's
Oh.
the physical side and the spiritual side, and that seems to be where my brain went. I don't know what to do with that
I
information.
know, but that's cool because think about this. In the heavenly, on the spiritual side, it's more dimensions than we move in.
Right.
So a 0 and a 1 won't work.
Right.
You
That's
gotta
true.
have bigger because there's more dimensions being moved around.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. I just thought the one being the achad,
Uh-huh.
being the connector
Right.
between this physical and the spiritual.
Yeah, and then the 7 for the millenniums maybe that break down even more. I don't know. Yeah, we could go all kinds of places.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of cool. It's even with the sacrifices, there seems to be, the baby needs to be with the mom at least 7 days,
gotta
and
have
then
a
one
Shabbat.
day later, it can be sacrificed. I mean, even with them, it's the 7s and the 1s.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know what to do with that information, but I'm sure somebody out there has a little more insight into that.
Yeah, good things to ponder, good things to ponder. Okay, well,
That's all we have for you today, and we will see you next week, and we hope you have a fabulous week.
shalom.